Hi guys, it's expected that Nigel Farage's rhetoric will find a welcoming home at the likes of GB News and Talk TV. It's expected that far-right rhetoric such as let's send everyone back to France. France is a safe country. People have no right to be in Britain. We need to put illegal migrants in camps, not in hotels. We need to send people back to Afghanistan, irrespective of who's in charge there. The rhetoric such as military-age young men and invasions taking place in Dover or whatever. This sort of rhetoric is expected, when it comes to GB News, Talk TV, and the newspapers like The Sun, The Express, The Daily Mail, or whatever. But you don't expect it at quality outlets like Sky News. They're supposed to be above the fray. But unfortunately, they're dancing to Nigel Farage's tune once again. And here's an article from John Craig, not some rookie at Sky News, not some intern, not some guy who's trying to make a career for himself. No, he's the chief political correspondent at Sky News. Now, it's important to differentiate headlines from articles. Newspapers often do this. They have a sensational title in order to get your attention, but then within the article they say something else. But this is not the case with John Craig's analysis. It says here, is it time for gunboats to help stop people smugglers? Now, the gunboats obviously would not be stopping the people smugglers. They would be stopping the asylum seekers, because the people smugglers are on land. You don't generally use gunboats against people on land. Now, I want to go to the part of the article. It's quite long and I'll leave a link in the description, but I want to read this part here. So he mentions about how Border Force have received more money, and he's asking if this is a good idea. He says, given that Border Force clearly cannot cope with the small boat crossings, is it time to bring in the Royal Navy and some gunboat diplomacy, since the French government clearly is not helping to stop the boats? Okay, the French government is helping to stop the boats, but as we know, it's pretty difficult to cover such a 300-mile coastline. Richard Tice and others have pointed to Belgium. Belgium has a much smaller coastline and there are fewer crossings from Belgium, so it's easier to monitor that. But France has a huge border, and remember, these people don't want to stay in France. But he goes on. It's happened before, after all. In January 2022, former Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced the Royal Navy would take command of counter-migration operations in the Channel to deter migrant crossings and intercept boats before they reach the British shores. It was called Operation Isotope. But after squabbling between the Home Office and the Ministry of Defence and the Mayor of Calais attacking the declaration of maritime war, Rishi Sunak's government handed back control to the Home Office. So this was once again one of Boris Johnson's antics to distract from his own problems. It was about appearing top. Let's use the Royal Navy to stop boats. Now, the Royal Navy said, okay, well, this is not our job. Our job is to defend the coastline from attacks from military vessels, not to push back migrant boats. It was insane. And of course, as we know, if you use military vessels like this to push back boats, it results in sinking the dinghies. And then what happens? Under the law of the sea, the Royal Navy have to extend support to these people. They have to rescue them and take them to the nearest safe port, which is probably Dover. So what would be the point in using the Royal Navy? It just sounded tough. It sounded like a good headline for Boris Johnson. But the fact that Sky News is regurgitating this is really concerning, because it shows how things that used to be said only by the far right have now become centre right, and they've moved from centre right to the mainstream. This sort of language, if you heard it from someone 20 years ago, would have been some guy down the pub, who was voting for UKIP or some extreme party further to the right of UKIP, and it would have been laughed off. We're not going to send the Navy to go after boats. Obviously, there weren't that many boats because people were crossing in other ways at the time. But we're not going to send the Royal Navy to deal with boats. That's a stupid thing to say. Even the average person on the street could understand that you don't do something like that. But now it has become mainstream. A senior political correspondent, the senior political correspondent at Sky News, is asking, is it time to use gunboats? Now, if he's not talking about small boats, is he talking about the French? Was it declaring war on France? How's that going to stop the boats? It's insane. It shows how mainstream media is now tap dancing to Nigel Farage's tune. And it's only going to get worse, unfortunately, because we're some years away from a general election. Unless the Labour government turn things around, Nigel Farage is going to become more and more of a replacement. People are going to see him as the real alternative. Maybe that's already happened. And that should not be the case. Nigel Farage should be nowhere near the levers of power. He's already creating a massive amount of influence, and that needs to stop. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think, and I'll see you in the next video.